now, and I was actually thinking about it while he was talking. We met in 2014, so that's a lot of years now. But tonight we're talking about a trip that is available and within reach to a lot of people here in Northwest Ohio. It's the Fort to Port, and it is traversing basically the Maumee River from its start to its end. That's how it gets its name. And there's a few different ways to do it, and there's different mileages involved in how you can do it, and we'll talk about that. I do want to say this presentation doesn't have a lot of slides. It does have a lot of videos, and they're pretty pictures, and I'm going to be talking during it. You don't have to look at me while I'm talking, and there's a pretty video online up there. It's just sort of something to look at and enjoy. Saying that, Craig's computer is doing a lot of things tonight, and it might not like these videos that much. So we'll see. This is going to put a pretty big test onto it. So at any point tonight, if you need the facilities, they're in the back. Ladies is on the right, gentlemen on the left. If you need to get up and stretch your legs, feel free. Just do it at the back. And I always welcome questions. Sometimes they'll say, well, I'm going to answer that on the next slide or something like that. But I love questions because if it's something that you want to know about, it's important to you, it's more likely to stick in your memory than whatever I'm planning on saying. Okay? Saying that, this was a trip done by 4 people. I don't think the PowerPoint's up right now. It's still on Craig's fancy slide where he drew an arrow. Go forth, you think? Oh, there it is. The 4 people that went on the trip are Christina Seiler, Paul Fazinski, Amanda Demalski, and myself. Paul and Christina are husband and wife. Paul was our first speaker in this series this year, talking about what there is to do around Northwest Ohio. Basically, he's gotten tired of people saying there's nothing to do here. So he's trying to give people a kick in the butt to realize how much stuff there is, in fact, to do around here. Him and his wife hiked the entire Appalachian Trail in one go. So they're through hikers, completers, and at the end of the hike, he proposed to her. Yeah. So they are hardy adventurers, more familiar with overnighting and roughing it than I was. In fact, all the camping gear that I used, I borrowed from them. And then Amanda is a former coworker of mine. She's still at Toledo Metro Parks in the outdoor skills section. Her and I met when she got hired in 2013. And her, myself, and Craig all went through ACA training and certification to be instructors in kayaking and canoeing. ACA is the American Canoe Association, though they teach way more than just canoe skills. So, what are we doing? I already mentioned it a little bit. We're kayaking the entire length of the Maumee River, as much as can be safely kayaked. And I say safely because there are 3 dams that you're not allowed to kayak over. And even if you're trying to sneak over them, it's a very poor idea, and we'll explain why in a little bit. The Maumee River is the single largest watershed in the entire Great Lakes. It drains more land than any other river that enters the Great Lakes. Most of that watershed is former Great Black Swamp. Today, about 80% of it is agriculture. About 20% is developed. One of the nicknames for the Maumee, especially in the spring, is the Muddy Maumee. And it's very true. The Maumee River contributes 5% of the water entering Lake Erie. It contributes 95% of all the sediment going into Lake Erie. It is, in fact, very muddy. But it's our major river. It's our big river here in Wood County and Lucas County. It's a fantastic resource for paddling, recreation, fishing. I'll stand over here. I grew up with it. Most of us that lived here in Northwest Ohio for any amount of time have either driven over it, walked into it, paddled on it. Some braver souls may have swam in it. It's muddy. It's not really chemically polluted anymore. The Clean Water Act in the 1970s cleaned up a lot of the really nasty chemicals that were going into our waterways. Now it really is just dirty, okay? So our plan was to be self-supported, meaning everything we need, we take with us. It goes in our boats, or it goes on our bodies. Those are the two main choices. So this is a Google Earth image. Down here is Fort Wayne, Indiana, all the way up northeast of Toledo. The different colored sections are actually the different days. So we did this paddle in 4 days. We'd allocated 5 in case of bad weather on one day, and we would just have to camp out somewhere. We did not end up using it, but in hindsight, we probably should have used 5 days and planned for 6. So what goes along with a trip like this is planning it out. I'm blanking on the saying about planning.
If you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
There you go, thank you. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So scouting was a big part of preparing for this trip, and I should rewind for just a second. The big driver of this trip was Paul Fazinski. He saw an article in the Blade about Steve Pollock and Matt Horvath doing this trip. Now, for Matt, that was his first time doing it. For Steve, it was his second, if not his third. I think he might have done it 3 times in his life. He was the outdoor writer for the Blade. And I know one of the times he did it, not the most recent, but one of the times he managed to do it in 3 days. Yeah, that's hauling. So Paul saw that and he wanted to do it. And it's always something that I wanted to do as well. We chose kayaks because we're all very individual in nature. We also, most of us owned kayaks at that point. If you're ever thinking about doing this, 2, and I'm going to stress this, competent canoers can do this trip more efficiently. A canoe is more efficient than a kayak if they're both competent. If one of them causes the kayak to go like this the entire time, or the canoe rather, that's not going to be good. So we scouted, and this sign you can find at all 3 of the dams on the Maumee. It's a warning about low-head dams, which is the type of dams that are on the Maumee. They're basically concrete dams and water spills over top of them. On the downstream side, right here, you get a hydraulic, and it's a circular hydraulic. Water goes down, out, and then gets pulled back towards the face of the dam, and then gets shot down again. They're basically called drowning machines or washing machines, because if you get caught in there, it's very hard to escape. This is Independence State Dam. It's one of the more impressive dams on the Maumee. I'd say it's more impressive than the dam at Providence. And the dam in Fort Wayne is an old hydroelectric dam, and it at one point was probably impressive, and now it looks dilapidated. But we had a beautiful day for scouting, and Paul actually scouted 2 different days. One day with me and Christina, and the other day with him and Amanda to look at different things along this 137-mile stretch. But this is what we mean by hydraulics. You see a couple of massive logs there, and you'll just continue seeing them there. They just spin and spin and spin. There is ways to get out of hydraulics. They're very difficult when you're at the very bottom of the cycle and close to the face of the dam. You're supposed to push off with your feet and stay at the bottom of the water near the bed of the river and try to shoot yourself out that way. Most times people have to be thrown a line and pulled out of hydraulics. And that's not going to happen if you're not wearing one of these. Okay, so we always stress wear your personal flotation device. It is the single most important thing to wear to save your life. Anytime you're around water, you can just see. The river here was really high. It was higher than typical flow, and this was a week before our paddle. And I know Amanda was getting a little bit concerned because she'd never paddled the river that high. I have before, and it can be gnarly. The Maumee River can be really, really powerful. Certain sections of it get upwards to class 2, almost class 3 rapids. So there's the dam in Fort Wayne. That's the old hydroelectric dam. Same day. I'll editorialize right now. All 3 of the dams on the Maumee pretty much no longer serve their original purpose. The hydroelectric dam in Fort Wayne doesn't really generate electricity. The dam, Independence Dam near Defiance, doesn't run any mills. The Providence Dam runs the Isaac Ludwig mill. That runs maybe 20 days a year or something. Ecologically, they're all terrible. They don't let fish pass to spawn upstream, and they are a danger to users of the river, recreational users. So, some of our prep involved figuring out what it was like to go into 58-degree water. Because one of the first things you learn about paddling at a training is always dress as if you're gonna fall in and know what that's like. 58-degree water was what was pretty much forecast for our trip. Anything below 60 degrees is capable of what's called cold shock, where as soon as your face enters the water, you have an involuntary gasp response. And if your face is in the water and you gasp, what are you breathing? Water, okay? Great resource for both water temperature and flow is the U.S. Geological Society survey. They have gauges all along the Maumee River and other local rivers like the Portage that report water flow. Now, caveat here, you have to actually go see what the river's doing and then start correlating it to the flow that's recorded to understand what's going on. When the river's up here near 17,000 cubic feet per second, that river is moving. I mean, it's carrying a lot of water. The little triangles down here are the average flow for that time of year. So right around, what, 3,000? So it was high. We planned this trip for the second week of May because we wanted the chance at having higher water, because we did not want to walk our boats. I don't have the kayak here tonight that I was using, but it's a Tsunami 145. It's 14.5 feet long. Empty, it weighs 56 pounds. Full of all my gear, it was probably closer to 80 pounds. Okay? So hauling that over slippery rocks in cold water with numb feet, not a good time. So you can check this. This is a resource that's always available. Sometimes if there's a big flood in the spring, the stations do get damaged and they won't be repaired until usually mid-May. This year, or that year, they had not been damaged. So, but this is the entire trip right here. So May 7th is when we departed, and we ended on May 11th. So you can see our flow was above 10,000 the entire time. Even if we stopped paddling, we were still drifting around 2 miles an hour. So this is at Wiregrass Lake Metro Park. This is where we went to test our wetsuits, our dry tops, our jackets, little lag there, and everything else we were planning on wearing. You can see that little knit cap I'm wearing, that's a Wood County Parks Polar Camp hat. This is Paul going over. By the way, all this video comes from Paul. He runs a blog and a YouTube channel called Aptitude Outdoors. He's very much into filming everything he does. So I do thank him for all this footage that we're watching. Right here we're practicing what are called wet exits. So we're all wearing what are called spray skirts, and they wrap around your body and then they wrap around the cockpit of the boat and they keep the water out. But if you flip over, they also keep you in the boat, underwater. So you have to know how to take those off and exit your boat, unless you know how to roll your boat upright using your paddle, which is a skill that none of the four of us have. Amanda might have it by now. I've not asked her if she's learned to roll yet, but our plan was always to just basically bail out. He just ripped his skirt off his cockpit, and now he's flipping out. This was a great thing that we did. We did it the second week of April, which gave us just enough time to figure out how being in the water would make us miserable. And I learned my misery while I was doing this for Amanda when we switched roles. I was standing in that water and my feet got so cold, it felt like someone was taking a hammer to them. Like miserably cold, painfully cold. And when I stepped out of the water and started walking, I wanted to fall over. So that's where I bought waterproof socks and paired them with my paddling shoes. I also at the same time saw these little guys. These are same manufacturer, they're sealskin. They're waterproof gloves with little grippies. And incidental purchase. I was standing there looking at the socks at Bass Pro and I saw they had gloves too. I'm like, well, okay, I'll get those. This, on 3 out of 4 days, saved me from being miserable on our trip. And they weren't even anything I was planning on buying. It was one of those impulse buys. So when someone says don't be an impulse buyer, which I get accused of quite frequently, sometimes it does pay off, okay? So gear-wise, here are the boats, and here is us standing there. We had 2 traditional, what you call touring kayaks. The red one in the back is my boat. Amanda's boat's not visible. Hers was a mango-colored touring boat. But touring boats have a hatch in the front and a hatch in the back, and they have a waterproof bulkhead separating both. So they're quote-unquote dry storage. So you can throw stuff in there with a half reasonable expectation that it'll stay dry. Always plan for the worst. So anything I wanted to stay dry went into dry bags and then went into the hatch. But the way we figured how much we could bring, because we didn't actually feel like weighing all the stuff, is if it would fit into a laundry basket, it would fit into our kayaks. Even with the recreational style, this is Paul's boat right here and Christina's boat right here, they only have a single dry hatch. A basket worth of stuff fits in there. So this is us loading up and getting ready to depart Fort Wayne, Indiana. This is Headwaters Park. It's a nice city park, and it's upstream of the confluence of the St. Joe's and St. Mary's. And we chose this spot because, like I said, we wanted every foot of the Maumee that we could get. And this is where we diverged from Matt Horvath and Steve Pollock's trip. They put in Fort Wayne, but they put in downstream of the dam. Technically, as long as you launch inside of Fort Wayne, Indiana, and you land in the Port of Toledo, you've done the port to port. You can make that trip 137 miles, or you can make it 127 miles. There's a lot of difference in there. Did it go all the way through, or did it freeze? It went all the way through. All right. So day one, if you know me or Amanda outside of work, we are chronically tardy. Paul makes fun of us relentlessly for it. He always just plans on us being 10 to 15 minutes late. And I think we left Oregon a little bit later than we planned and drove to Fort Wayne. My aunt and uncle basically followed us so that they could haul back the tow vehicle so we didn't have to leave a vehicle in Fort Wayne. Let's see here. Pick a horrible picture. This is Headwaters Park. So we ended up launching, that video that you saw, we were launching right in here. And this park has a boat ramp over here, We weren't true gluttons for punishment. We didn't want to go all the way around this little peninsula and then back down. So we did look for the shortest place that we could launch in the park itself. The boat launch probably, in retrospect, would have been a better choice. The steps of the launch that we went down were extremely muddy. The four of us managed not to fall. My aunt did manage to fall. She didn't go in the water, though. But she did end up with very muddy legs and butt. But heads on down, and you hit the confluence, and you're on your way. It brought us to our first portage very fast, 1.5 miles. I know, we're ridiculous, but we wanted every mile. We wanted everything. The portage itself was right here. It was unmarked, and probably still unmarked to this day. But this is where scouting came in. We parked near the dam and walked upstream, and we saw this little grassy area. It wasn't mowed. Grass was like this tall, but there was no trees, and you could see the river really well. And hike up this hill, down the sidewalk, looking like a bunch of strange people, I'm sure, to everyone driving down this very busy road. There's a little crosswalk here that there's really no button to push. But there's signs saying pedestrians are allowed to cross when they want. And the drivers don't think so at all. And then across here and down this slope. And this slope is deceivingly steep. This is probably 30 feet above the river surface, and it's probably only 150 feet long. It's quite steep. The funny thing is, we got here, and I had to make a phone call. My truck was in the shop and needed repaired, and I needed it to be done before the trip was over, or after the trip was over. And so I called, and I get done with my call, and all three of them are already eating. That's sort of the common theme with paddlers. Paddlers eat, like all the time. Anytime paddling stops, food starts. So on this trip, I think I might have lost 2 pounds. Maybe, and I'm going to guess that Amanda probably held her own the entire trip because she is definitely the first one to bust out the snacks. So, at the end of day one, it brought us to Antwerp, Ohio. So, we covered, I think it was 33 or 34 miles. We got a late start. We weren't on the water until 10:15. Paul had contacted the city of Antwerp and gotten permission for us to camp in their city park that's along the river. It's not normally open for camping. It's just a grassy area with some playground equipment, restrooms, couple shelters. But between there and Fort Wayne, there's no public campgrounds. And it sort of brings us to the point of, if you want to do this trip, you're going to have to scout. And you're probably going to have to talk to either some landowners or public entities for certain stretches. Our fallback of Antwerp wasn't going to allow us to camp. There was a petting farm somewhere near the Indiana border that we were going to approach second. It looked like they had good access to the river. And being that they were open to the public, they probably actually had public restrooms and water. But we got into Antwerp, and we were tired. I mean, 33 miles, first real paddle of the year, and into the unknown, which is always stressful. You know, we're always looking for the landing as we got closer and closer. The upper Maumee is very sinuous, so it's very snake-like in nature. Like, how many more curves do we have to go around before we get there? And at one point I thought it was 5, and it turned out to be 11. And so much for my map reading skills. But we got there, we pitched camp. Always the first priority in primitive camping is to get your camp set up first. Because if you do it in the light, it's way easier, it's way faster. So we got everything pitched. Amanda and Paul started walking into the town. Christina and I still needed to change. Walked up to the restrooms. She pulls on the women's handle. It's locked. And we're like, what the heck? Like, we asked them, would you leave the restrooms open so that we could use them? And they said, yeah. So we go to the men's and pull it open. And it opens. And I'm like, I look in and there's 2 stalls. I'm like, do you care? And she's like, no, come on in. So we go in and change out of our clothes, and she changed first, and I'm washing my hands, and I hear click. And I'm like, I go to the door, and nothing, won't open. I'm like, hello? Nothing, there's no one out there. They were automatically locking doors. They were on a timer. And I don't know why the men and women's were different, but they were. And I said, Christina, the door's locked. And she's like, what? I'm like, the door's locked. And she came out, and that's when we took this picture after she tried the door. I'm like, oh crap. And I tried calling Paul, no answer. I tried calling Amanda, no answer. I'm like, fuck. Like, they walked in, we didn't know how long they were gonna be. You know, they were going to the gas station to get some drinks and snacks, you know, food, always important. They were gonna try to get a pizza, because apparently the one gas station made pizza. And you never turn down warm pizza, especially if it's versus having cold food, because we weren't gonna have campfires. So I get on my phone, I look up the Village of Antwerp, look up their non-emergency line, I call it. Lady answers, you know, Village of Antwerp, non-emergency line. I'm like, hi, my name's Bill. I'm with a group that are paddling from Fort Wayne to Toledo. We got permission to camp in your park, and I'm in the restroom, and the door just locked and it won't open. And I get silence. She's like, wait a second. And I hear click, click. Can you repeat that? And I repeat the whole thing, and I hear 2 people laughing. I'm like, okay. She's like, yeah, they just got new locks on those doors a few weeks ago. I don't know quite what to do. We'll send a unit by, and I'll try to reach out to the park manager or the supervisor, or, you know, division of parks. You know, maybe they can unlock it remotely. And I'm like, that'd be awesome. And she's like, all right, stay on the line until the unit gets there. So I stay on the line. About 5 minutes later, I hear voices walking up to the bathroom, and they knock. And is there someone in there? I'm like, yeah, we're in here. And they're like, we? I'm like, yeah, there's 2 of us. 2 guys? I'm like, no, not 2 guys. And they start laughing. And they're like, we're going to see if we have a key for the door. And you start hearing them try keys in the door. And eventually they got it open. They did, in fact, have a key to the door. Fun thing is, if you go do a public records request, I had to do a whole police report about it, so my name's there somewhere. They didn't know how to turn off the automatic locking doors. So we just stuck a big piece of wood in the door and kept it open all night in case we needed to use it, because we didn't know how early we were leaving, whether they'd be open again, and everyone knows, you know, what you do first thing in the morning. So that was our first little road speed bump or roadblock in our trip. But it was, uh-oh. Okay, I should have been playing this the entire time. This is us launching. So we won't watch past where we launch, but these are the steps I was talking about. They're very muddy. Not really built for launching paddlecraft. They're not narrow. You see the kind of fun that's there. But it works. I mean, I've launched from worse places than that, and I've landed at worse places than that. As far as outfitting the boats, right there you can see I have a water bladder on top. The maps were underneath the water. The river maps, everybody had a set. There's my aunt and uncle back there. Amanda's trying to help Paul. Amazingly, none of us managed to dump launching from there. So, but this is a part where Paul usually talks about Fort Wayne, and this is the confluence, by the way. That's the St. Mary's coming in, or the St. Joe's. The one from Michigan comes in right there, and the one from Indiana comes in, is what we're on. Anyway, Paul talks about, he used to be with Partners for Clean Streams, which is an organization that's concerned about the health of our rivers. And almost the entire stretch of the Maumee in Indiana, there's litter all along the banks. I mean, it was atrocious. There's our portage. It is what it is. There is a group in Fort Wayne, centered in Fort Wayne, that's trying to save the Maumee. They bring attention to it, and they do events to try to protect the health of the Maumee River. In an urban setting, especially with banks as high as what is found in most of Fort Wayne, any trash that gets to the edge of the banks get into the river. It's not like the Maumee where the bank is not much higher than the water. There is actual topography in Fort Wayne. Yeah, eating. So this is called rafting. We're all holding on to each other's boats. And for whatever peculiarity, yeah, there's some flow there. Whenever you raft up with this type of boat, you always end up going stern first. You're going backwards, which is annoying. It'd be much better if the boats would stay facing forward. But a nice first day. I mean, it was partly cloudy, you can see that. Temperatures weren't bad, I think upper 50s. Chilly enough that you'd want long sleeves, but most people, well, with the exception of Amanda, would paddle without a jacket on. Amanda is perpetually cold. Though I'm wearing a jacket right there, so I must have cooled off at some point.
How long did it take you to get to Antwerp when you stopped?
So that first day we were on the water, probably 7 hours, 8 hours. So this is a this is a potty break, and I don't know what Amanda said that was hilarious, but one of the great things about being with a group of people that you know is you know what kind of quantity you're getting and quality. I wouldn't do this with people that I don't know unless it was a large group. Because certain people, when they encounter challenges or get fatigued, they get really mopey and depressing. And I am one of those people that, here's the landing at the park in Antwerp. I'm one of those people that is always looking for the positive, or at least the neutral in things. I don't dwell on the negative, and people that do really bring me down. So this was a great group. Everyone could laugh at themselves, which is pretty much required for more endurance type activities. So day 2, we thought it was going to be 41.3 miles. In fact, it was 45.5. It was our longest day. And it was by far the most miserable day. If I had to do it again, this is the day we would have split into 2. One because of the distance, 2 because of the conditions that we encountered. It started great. About an hour into the paddle. So we left Antwerp down here. About the time you get somewhere in here, that particular week in May, we'd had big rains the week before, but we had dry conditions forecasted for most of the week. Every farmer along the river, within 2 or 3 miles, it seemed like every one of them was spreading manure on their field. I mean, it was literally hour after hour after hour after hour of smelling manure, and strong, nasty manure. The scenery was beautiful. Almost all the banks in this entire stretch, until you get just outside of Defiance, are forested. We saw daytime raccoons, we saw turkeys, we saw deer, but the stench was terrible, terrible. So one of the stats over here, if you get into paddling, is it's fall. How much is the river falling? Because the more it's falling, the faster it's going. Gravity gives it an assist. So 1.1 feet per mile is not much fall. It's not bad for the Maumee, but you go anywhere else in the country, and that figure over a mile is going to be close to double digits. Not here in pancake country, okay? Glacier took care of that problem. So, nice blue skies. I think this is one of the few pictures that I took. To do it all over again, a point and shoot waterproof camera, so I didn't have to worry about dropping my cell phone, would have been something I packed. Paul had all kinds of GoPros, so I sort of relying on him for a lot of photos, but I took a few photos. But you can see the stream bank along here. A couple other things, if you're seeing some of these changes to the surface, those are actually riffles caused by the water bouncing off the bottom. We were in 2 to 3 feet of water here. In the summer, this would be an area where you'd expect a half foot to 2 feet during normal summer flows. This was a stretch of river that we wanted high water for because it was another one we were worried about having to walk if the water was low. That's why this trip wasn't scheduled in June or July when we could have had a lot less cold weather gear, because by that time of year, it's really hit or miss. Either the river's flowing great or it's dry as can be, and you're walking and walking and walking. So.
Question.
Yes?
That paddling looked really fast. Was that consistent, or were you just at a rapid spot?
So, great question. So we are all very determined people, and we all knew this was going to be a long day. So when we were paddling, most of us, when we learned, Craig, Amanda, and myself, the style of paddling that we do is called high angle paddling. So it's really pushing from your shoulder and rotating your hip like this. So it always looks a little bit more strenuous, and it is. It's a stroke that gives you more power. But if you have shoulder issues, it's a stroke that really hurts. The other choice is low angle paddling, where you're pushing from your elbow height, and that's more of the recreational style. So we knew we had to go. We try not to take too many breaks. I don't know, did this video get to us standing on land anywhere yet? Okay. We'll talk about gear real quick. When you're getting into paddling, you have 3 things you have to buy: a boat, a PFD, personal flotation device, and a paddle. Those are the 3 things that you want to put your money towards first. Before anything else, before like the cool dry top or neoprene, this is something that to go a mile, you're going to do this, whatever, 500 times, 1,000 times to go a mile. The lighter this is, the better off you are. And when we're done today, if you want to come up and feel it, this is my lightest paddle. It's just under 30 ounces. This one's 34. This one is my daughter's, and you see it's a lot shorter. It's about 39. This is the type of paddle Amanda had, courtesy of Metro Parks. And the fact that Amanda doesn't own her own kayak, so she hasn't bought her own paddle. These other 2 I bought. And I bought this one first to see if I like the style, and it's a high angle paddle style. And once I knew I liked this, I bought this one, and it's even lighter. When I bought this, it was 150. When I bought this, it was 175. Today, this one's like 175, and this is like 230. So on a long trip, it makes a difference. On a day paddle, not that much. I paddled with this one for 2 years. My daughter goes out with me for 2 hours with her paddle, and she's still growing. She's up front here, by the way. She's 9. So she's not going to get a really nice paddle until she stops getting taller, and she's just going to have to deal with it. So,
Did you, we've done this section right here.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with that railroad bridge. Did you happen to notice the eagles that are in the area there?
so that is a great question. So we started, or at least I did, I kept track of how many eagles I saw, because if you're old enough, you know that by the mid to late 70s, there was like 4 eagles left in the entire state. And so like they're a big deal. At the end of day 1, I'd already counted 20 eagles. I was done counting eagles. We saw eagles every day. We saw great blue herons every day. We saw kingfishers every day. Not that we ever got tired of seeing them. It was awesome. If you've ever seen a bald eagle, it's a great experience. If you ever hear them, they sound like overgrown seagulls. They're not that impressive. And the ones that you jostle from being perched over the river, they always let out their little seagull cry and they fly away. And eventually you get sort of immune to them, immune to the effect. Another thing that our boats had, my boat has a rudder. Amanda's and Paul's and Christina's all have a drop-down skeg. That keeps your boat tracking straighter. The rudder can actually steer you. The rudder is not necessary on the Maumee. The skeg is definitely nice to have once the river gets wider and the wind gets more impactful. And by the end of day 2, that had occurred. The end of day 2 was the most miserable part, because once we turned northeast towards Defiance, we were facing a headwind of about 20 miles an hour, and the stretch of river right there is long enough that it actually developed about 1-foot waves with white caps coming right at us. And that was a miserable way to end the day. So I don't know that we're going to wait long enough. What I was waiting for, apparently, okay, it'll be on this one. Maybe? Independence Dam. Well, in case we don't hit it, in that stretch of lovely smelling manure, we had to stop and stretch our legs. And there's nothing there. I know that the water trail has to have a designated stop at least every 10 miles. I don't know if it didn't time out well, or we missed it, or we just pushed past it figuring we'd get out somewhere else. We eventually found a creek going back away from the river, and we paddled up that, climbed up the muddy bank, and ate peanut butter and jelly bagels amid the smell of manure. Okay, it was there? Okay. That was the most disgusting environment I've ever eaten a meal in, without a doubt. You get out, you take off your gloves, you do your business, and then you just gob on hand sanitizer and pray for the best, okay? Because there was no getting clean anywhere near where we ate lunch at all.
Do you eat peanut butter now?
I still do. I love peanut butter. And I got a special treat because somebody brought crunchy peanut butter, which we never have at home. So I slather on the peanut butter and onto the bagels to eat. That was delicious. I ate 2 of them. That's how hungry I was. Like, I didn't lose my appetite even standing amongst that smell. So this is Independence Dam. The recommended portage is actually back here at the boat launch at the state park. The campground is down here somewhere. This is downstream of the dam. This is where you launch back in. The recommended is a 1/4 mile walk to get around the dam. When we were scouting, there is a set of stairs right here. But this is the dam that, if you remember, it's a tall dam. With the huge hydraulic on the backside of it. The water was high enough on day 2 that we weren't risking that, because one of us would have had to stay here, 2 of us back here. It was only wide enough to land 1 person at a time. And the water was quick. So we landed here and hopped out and actually had some help. Paul was filming a show that used to be on BCAN, that's Buckeye Cable Art Network, and his cameraman met us there and actually took some of our gear out of our kayaks, but we still carried the kayaks this entire way, only about half loaded. They were here to do this filming, drone footage. So it's us looking pretty. And Paul sped this one up a little bit. Kayaks are quick, they're not that quick. To sort of speak to the end of the day, you can see the waves, they're actually heading against us. The closer you get to where the wind's blocked, that's a lee shore, and the waves fall and fall and fall. Where our misery really was upstream of Defiance. And when we came around that corner and hit those 1-foot waves, we were 40 miles into the day. We were on hour 9 or whatever. And it'd probably been 4 hours since we had lunch, and we were spent. There's Alan, that's Amanda's husband. He was, funny story, there's a motorcyclist that would stop along the road and look down at us and rev his engine and keep going. None of us could figure out who the hell he was. It turned out it was Alan, and I don't know why he didn't flip up his visor or take off his helmet and actually wave hi. We just thought we had some kind of weird motorcycle stalker going on. He did help. He carried boats for a couple times. Like I said, this portaging is no fun. But when we stopped after hitting downtown Defiance, there was a landing there on the water trail, and we stuffed our face and caught our breath, and a couple of us might have had some tears of frustration. It was, without a doubt, I mean, for as pretty as these images are, the end of that day was miserable. Here we've relaunched, and we have 2.5 more miles to get to the campground. So we've been in and out of our boats 3 or 4 times during the day. They had scouted the campground and hang flagging tape on a tree next to the river. By the time we got anywhere near it, it was pitch dark. It was this. The only reason we found it was because the camera crew found our campsite and walked down to the shore and flagged us down with flashlights. Because when Paul hung the flagging the week before, the river was up 3 feet. He hung the flagging about 8 feet from the bank of where it was when we landed. So we would never have seen it at all. In hindsight, we should have hung reflective flagging, and then at least our headlamps would have had a chance at seeing it. But about portaging, it stinks. It is probably my least favorite thing about paddle trips. They make lightweight boats. This is a Kevlar canoe. This is just stock photos from other places. Paul usually talks about portaging because Paul's one of those people that like misery and doing things that make him look strong. I'm more for doing things that are easy to do and not unpleasant. But you have lightweight boats that you can single portage, and that includes kayaks. All kinds of baggage that straps to you. Whereas dry bags, I mean, if you wanted to empty your boat, you got one little strappy doodah. You know, there's a limit to how many you can put on and be comfortable. And then they make portaging barrels. You know, it's more for canoes than anything else. But if you're going to do this trip, just be aware that it is involved. Even if you skip the one in Fort Wayne, there's still 2 dams that you got to get around. To circle back to Steve Pollock and Matt Horvath, they had a support crew with them. And if you read Steve's account, they got to leave their boats at their landing site each night, and they went to a hotel. They were driven to a hotel. And then they came back to the boats in the morning, and they kept going. When they did it, they didn't even have to portage the Providence Dam because the locks on the Grand Rapids side were still open. They just went right through the locks. So
you're saying you're better?
I'm not saying I'm better. I'm saying we had it tougher.
Where did you camp the second night?
So second night was Independence Dam State Park. So public camping. We reserved a site. It's downstream of the dam. Yeah. And it is primitive camping. And on the website, it said there was no potable water. So that was the only place that we had planned for someone to bring us water. So Paul's cameraman, his name's Jeff, brought us 20 gallons of water. And like we drank and drank and drank. We filled up all of our water bottles. We kept all the jugs until the morning and then refilled everything and then put the jugs in the dumpster. Turns out there was potable water in the campground. There was a tap. So I don't know why their website was out of date. I never went back to ask why. I just figured it's the state being the state. I slept good this entire trip, but I sleep like the dead. Paul, Christina, and Amanda all got woke up on the morning of day 3 when we were at Independence Dam State Park by 2 ladies walking their dogs and talking exceedingly loud about 6 a.m. I slept right through it. It is what it is. Public campgrounds are what they are. That was the most easily reserved campsite we used. The other one is at Farnsworth Metro Park through Toledo Metro Parks. I think now you can reserve it online, but State Parks reservation system is great. It does what it's supposed to do. But, yeah.
I think the Independence Dam State Park, that was closed as a campground for a period of time, and then they reopened it.
Well, it might have been.
And so maybe get that onto the website when it reopened. I don't know the dates on any of that.
Okay. That might be. Yeah. Yeah, and their water supply might have been damaged and it had been repaired recently. I don't know. So, day 3 was our questionable day. The weather forecast was not great. We knew we were going to have thunderstorms at some point, and we looked on our phones and we're like, well, we should have at least 4 to 5 hours of paddling out of the 6 or 7. Oh, by the way, day 2, that was a legit 11 hours of paddling. Yeah, that was a long day. And then usually, I forgot to mention it. Like I said, this is usually a talk done by 2 or 3 people. Usually Paul and Amanda help. Just me tonight. I did not get any more sore after the morning of day 2. The level of soreness just stayed the same the entire trip. Okay? It was ibuprofen every 6 hours. It wasn't excruciating. It was just my shoulders are sore, my wrist is sore, my elbows are sore, my back is sore, my butt is sore. Basically from here up, sore. Not excruciating. This is not a sprint. This is just endurance. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So, day 3, like I said, questionable day weather-wise. We were going to get some paddling in. We didn't want to use our weather day. We didn't want to stay at Independence Dam a second day. The fall here was even less than day 2. So we weren't looking forward to any kind of great speed. There we go. That's actually me. That was end of day, or morning of day 2. So we're striking camp. Fun thing was, I'd never used Paul's tent before. The first day, Christina helped me, took me a half hour. Second day, I did it myself, took me 25 minutes. Third day, I pitched it in 10 minutes. So there's a learning curve there. That little entry into the kayak, I was super proud of. It's called a high dock entry. You sort of corkscrew yourself way into there. I managed not to flip in with minimal assistance. So I told Paul he had to put that part of the video into this. This day also was my 38th birthday. Give you an idea of age. I was an old man on the trip. The rest of these guys, Amanda might have been 30, and Paul and Christina were late 20s. So I'm the old man.
Questioning yourself on part of this trip, what the heck did I get myself into?
No, but that's just me being sort of always on the positive. Like, once I start doing something, the only way to get me to stop is to force me to stop. So I wasn't gonna bail or anything like that. So I don't think there's anything super striking in this video. We'll talk about the Providence Dam. So recommended portage, this is Mary Jane Thurston Park. is to get out here, walk across the bridge to the parking lot, and there's a little launch right here. This is the old canal lock. This is the one that Steve Pollock and Matt Horvath just paddled right on through and kept on going. We decided to land here at these steps. The river had fallen at that point. We felt like it was safe enough. There also was the motivation that a thunderstorm was rolling in right behind us. Come on, clicker, you can do it. Are you clicking? There we go. So a thunderstorm rolled in right behind us. There had been 4 teenagers right here, and we were all sitting here watching the thunderstorm come right behind them. They were just completely oblivious or didn't care, didn't quite know what was going to happen. And then the sky just opened up on them, and they all ran for the parking lot, and we just sat there laughing. The reason, well, she doesn't look too grouchy. He was getting grouchy because our safety rule is you don't go back on the water until 30 minutes after the last clap of lightning, because lightning can strike up to 30 miles away from the storm cloud. That's what a bolt out of the blue is. You have a blue sky and a bolt hit you dead. So Paul was getting impatient and wanted to get paddling again. Amanda and I made him wait because we're both instructors and very safety conscious. So this is us basically just approaching that portage. A lot of wood there, not much current. So wood that's in the water, if it's above the water surface, those are called sweepers because they can sweep you right out of your boat if you hit them. The ones underwater are called strainers because you can get pinned to them like spaghetti in a colander, and you can actually drown from that. So along the Maumee, they're not super frequent. In our stretch between Lucas and Wood County, there's only 2 or 3 places where we see sweepers and strainers with any kind of regularity. So our stretch of the river is pretty safe. Saying that, after we get past this dam, we're paddling sections that all 4 of us have paddled a lot. Everything before this point, neither Amanda or I had seen before, nor had Christina. Paul had paddled a stretch with another former coworker, Catherine, before, but that was during the summer and they'd walked a lot. They were in a canoe. So that's what that looks like right there. I think Jeff, for the second time on the trip, brought us pizza at the dam while we waited for the thunderstorm. I think we ended up eating pizza all 4 days. Not day 1. Nope, yep, day 1. Day 1 was Antwerp. We ate pizza every day. So I had packed this along. This was from my daughter, Alyssa, who was 6 at the time, I believe, 5 or 6. Alan showed back up and brought a store-bought cake and some adult beverages, and we broke Metro Parks rules and drank those beverages in the park and celebrated my birthday. That day ended in rain. It rained all night long. One of the things that I took away from the trip is I was never really dry the entire time. One, because I was wearing a neoprene wetsuit, which traps moisture, traps your sweat. We'll talk about that at the very end. But this night and that morning really sort of hit it that on this trip, it's very hard to be dry unless you are going to a hotel room and taking a shower and have towels. I brought a towel with me. It's a little packing towel, but it didn't do a whole lot.
So would a dry suit have helped?
So
Too warm.
it'd been too warm. You still would have been sitting in your own sweat, is the thing. So, end of this day, we did have a few rapids. They weren't anything crazy. There's a few upstream of Farnsworth Metro Park. It was nice, most for Christina, because she'd never been on rapids in her kayak on a river. So she got a little bit of experience. She was a little leery of it. That's Paul being Paul. Here's the rapids. They're a little like 1 footer, 1.5 footers. They're not anything super gnarly. Worst thing you can do for rapids, and I don't think you'll see Paul do it much, is to stop paddling. You always want to have a paddle blade in the water through rapids. That way if something does throw you, you're already there to be able to apply force to get you out of it. You know, if your back end gets kicked out from under you, you got a blade in the water to correct yourself. So when you watch people hold up their blades like they're on a Cedar Point ride going through rapids, those people are asking to get dumped. Most of the time it's not a big deal. But we see it a lot around Jerome Road Rapids near Sidecut. So final day launch. This was exciting for a few reasons. One, it's the last day. Two, we're about to go through a bunch of rapids. Three, Amanda's parents came and took away everything that we didn't need anymore. So our boats were lighter, there were no more portages to do. The only downside to this day was it was windier and colder than it wasn't windier than any other day, but the two combined made it the coldest day to paddle. But it was too exciting to really matter. A lot of fall here, 40 feet, but most of it is in the first 10 miles. So it was steep. And if we look at the map, you know, we're down here, Farnsworth. When you get to Ewing Island, that's the end of the rapids. Right around Ewing, you are at the same level pretty much as Lake Erie, water surface wise. There's still flow, there's still current, it's just a lot less. We ran into the same thing when you hit whatever elevation for each dam, you reach upstream, you reach a lake above the dam. So there's a lot less current. So there were stretches on previous days where it was almost flat water.
So did you have to port at Farnsworth by the old bridge? Or you were able to get through there?
Oh, we were able to get through there, yeah.
That's high enough. Okay.
Yeah, it was high enough. Yeah. So that does bring back those USGS monitoring sites. There is one in Waterville. When it reads above 2,900 cubic feet per second, you can get through underneath that bridge there in Waterville. You might scrape a little bit, but you're not going to have to walk. When it's below 2,900, odds are you're going to be walking or at least standing up and getting over whatever hump hung you up and then keep going. So that's, if you want to call it 3,000, this is the magic number to get through there. Metro Parks on their website does have some kind of number. They do it in gauge height. I like flow rate better. But when the gauge height's high enough, they'll let you paddle from Farnsworth to Sidecut with rented kayaks. When it's too low, they won't because it's too much walking. Oh yeah, mopping out boats. We were probably still mopping out manure smell at this point because the mud just sticks everywhere. This is the boat launch at Farnsworth Metro Park. You can see they haven't even cleared it yet from the winter debris. It was still, everywhere we went, none of the parks and whatnot had cleared their launch and landing points on the water trail. So. Other questions right now?
So you say the water level there at Ewing Island or there by the Perrysburg Maumee, that's about equal with the lake?
It's pretty close. So it does depend on flow. The reason I say that is if you are near Ewing and you look at the ice scars on the trees, you can find them on both sides or all sides of the trees, meaning that the ice is actually sometimes flowing back upstream, and that's an influence of the lake. If you remember right before Christmas, all the water blew out of our end of the lake. Well, it can be also blown into our end, and the Maumee River can actually run backwards.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. A wildlife officer told me that, you know, you'll see them, you'll see them walleye fishing in the spring way back there by the Maumee Perrysburg Bridge. And he said, you know, it can push back with a northeast wind for 10 miles there. So.
Yeah, all the way up to at least the 475 bridge is where you can start. You can see ice scars on different sides of the trees, not just upstream. Yeah. Yeah, so the old interurban bridge, which I just saw a post, they're planning on taking it down in 2024. So if you want to go get pictures or you want to paddle under it, it's terrifying to paddle under. There's big old hunks of concrete hanging down by rebar. There's all kinds of concrete that are piled up underneath that you can run into. That pier over there, one year, Catherine, Clement, and I were leading a paddle from Metro Parks Toledo from Providence to Sidecut. And there was all kinds of wood piled in front of that pier, and it had the biggest hydraulic hole behind it that I've ever seen in my life. And I paddled right by it, not knowing it was going to be there. And I looked down, and I swear I was looking down 8 feet. That is a bridge, as beautiful as it is. I'm not going to be sad to see it go. I'm not a whitewater kayaker. They love some of the hydraulics that appear behind these piers, but I'm not that kayaker. It is undoubtedly about the only significant hazard left on the river in this stretch, other than power boaters once you get close to Toledo. So, really pretty bridge. Only served its useful purpose for about 35 years. At one point, it was the longest earth-filled bridge in at least the United States, if not the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what if they took all the dams?
I'd cheer them on. There'd be a lot of unhappy power boaters because that's really what,
Yes, much water.
there wouldn't be reliable water.
Right, right.
So all the marinas upstream of those dams, they would be out of business.
We went on a river in Michigan, what river was that? Boardman, after they took the dams out.
Oh, okay.
It was interesting.
Before and after, so you got to see both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, ecologically, there's a lot of reasons why at least the two Ohio dams should go. It'd help with a lot of fish spawning and mussel spawning, freshwater mussels. So Granger Island is a Metro Parks holding. At the time we were paddling, the Route 64 bridge was being replaced. It was the second piece of large construction that we knew about and had scouted. Paul and Amanda scouted this one and the one upstream of Defiance. They were putting in a new underground pipe of some sort, and they had weired off part of the river. Weiring means to block part of the channel and basically de-water it to work, or at least reduce the current. So you're forcing all the current into a narrower section, so it speeds up and it rises. When we got to about here, we could see the waves in this section. This whole part was weired off, and they were bigger than we were expecting. So we were here, and we immediately went zip, right back here and landed on Granger Island. There is one cabin and 3 camping platforms there that the Metro Parks have built, and we walked to the head of the island to sort of figure out what we were going to do about this. Because remember, this was the coldest day. None of us wanted to get wet. So far, none of us had flipped in or dunked. So we're hiking down what would be the east side of Granger Island to the tail of the island towards the bridge just to see what we wanted to do. And the fun thing that happened here, there was a wild turkey roosted up in the trees. We didn't know it, and it took off. And it about scared the crap out of Paul. Yeah, it's a theme. Anytime, yeah, I'm bringing my food bag too. So we're looking, and ultimately what we decided, the water was high enough that there was a channel over here. The big waves were over here. So we were going to shoot upstream just a little bit, ferry over, and then hug that bank. Because we knew that would be the least likely to have big waves and hydraulics. And a hydraulic is just any way that water is moving very quick. Hydraulics can be circular, like whirlpools. They can be sucker holes. They can be feedbacks, eddies, things like that. We wanted to avoid that. we're much more comfortable with our big plastic boats running into rocks than to get sucked into a hydraulic that we didn't know was going to be there. This entire time, I think at this point, Paul's like, let's go. And this is me and Amanda overthinking things. So it's probably why he's filming it and still cursing us. Paul is very much a go, go, go. I'll deal with whatever comes. Amanda and I are way more planners and want to have an idea of what's coming. So, I don't know if that's in there or not, but it was a narrow channel, and these little scratches here on the end of my blade are from fending off roots sticking out of the bank so that I didn't get hit in the face. It wasn't the most pleasant way around, but it was the safest. We weren't wrong. So, I don't know if Paul filmed any of that going through or not. Okay, here we go. Rapids, 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 rapids. This is the best part of the Maumee. You live right by it. If you live in Wood County or Lucas County, you're there. You don't have to drive 108 miles to go to Fort Wayne to experience the best parts of the Maumee. Starting below Waterville is pretty much rapid after rapid. They're not super gnarly unless you're getting into really high flow rates. If we would have hit these rapids at the flow rate that we had on the first day that we launched, we would have seen some huge waves. Because that trip I took with Catherine from Metro Parks, we were paddling at around 23,000 cubic feet per second, which was probably not the best thing to do with beginners. But when you hit Jerome Road Rapids at that flow rate, you can find a trough that drops down 3 feet and a wave behind it that's about 4 feet higher. And the whole trough is about 12 feet long. And the first time I hit that, I saw it coming. I'm like, oh well, nothing I can do now, and just paddled right into it. The lady beside me saw it and said, oh no, and started paddling sideways, and she got flipped out of her boat. So sometimes you just have to hit things head on. But these weren't anything we were super concerned about. We were looking forward to them. Remember, we were wearing spray skirts, so even if a wave came up and hit us in the chest, sorry, Craig, it wasn't going to go into our boat. We weren't at risk for swamping. We could hit these things all day long, and it would be fine.
And it was your last day.
And it was our last day. We knew this was going to be the fun part, because after this, it's all flat, and it's all work. So we really enjoyed it. We really, again, we're thankful that Amanda's parents took all our excess weight, because we didn't have to worry about riding low in the water. The lower you ride, after a certain point, you have a higher chance of flipping, just from water getting on top of your boat. This is a section that Craig and I want to do every year with the public. We're scheduling it for this year in May. It'll fill up fast because we're only going to take 10 people, because that's sort of the safety ratio of instructors and participants. It's 1 to 5. So it is something to watch for on our website if you want to do this. It can be anywhere from a 2.5-hour trip to a 4-hour trip, depending on water conditions. If the water's up, it goes fast. If the water's down, you go slower, and you have to work for it a little bit more.
From where to where?
Basically, this stretch is from Farnsworth to Sidecut, but our trip would be from Grand Rapids to Orleans.
Otsego to Orleans.
Oh, Otsego to Orleans, okay. Our Otsego Park to Orleans and Perrysburg. So,
May 20th.
May 20th, there you go.
How much further is that than Grand Rapids?
Not far.
Okay.
3 miles?
Earlier.
3 or 4 miles.
Oh, and you're going to port though, right? Portage?
No need to portage on our trip, because we'll be downstream of the Grand Rapids Providence Dam. Yeah. So, no, it is the best part of the Maumee, in my opinion, as far as fun water. If you want scenery, the upper stretch is way more scenic.
Can you bring your own kayaks on that?
With approval from Craig and I on your craft.
And do you have to have a skirt, probably? You would recommend.
Nope.
Oh, okay, all right.
No, if you get enough water in, then we will hand you a handy dandy pump and you can pump out your boat as you float.
Do we have whitewater boats?
We don't, and mostly because, one, we're not whitewater certified, and two, Metro Parks has whitewater boats, and they never use them. So even trying to get whitewater conditions, it's tough. You can't schedule it ahead of time. It has to be last minute, which is unfortunate, but that's the way the Maumee is.
Ooh, he was getting pretty wet.
Oh yeah, you get some chest thumpers in there. The flow was good. There probably some 3-footers in there that he hit. I think at this point, yeah, we weren't trying to dodge him. Paul and I weren't. Amanda and Christina weren't going for the biggest waves they could find, but Paul and I were. But yeah, that last wave sort of turned his camera sideways. This is the section that Paul was most frustrated with as far as his show on Basecamp, because his cameraman was supposed to be set up midway through the rapids getting shots, and he had emailed GPS coordinates and everything, and for some reason they couldn't find Jerome Road Rapids. They went to Side Cut, like the main part of Side Cut where there's no rapids, and they filmed us going by really slow and sedately. So that irked Paul very much so. That's probably Bluegrass Island there, maybe. So once you get past Ewing Island, Audubon Island State Nature Preserve, you know, the sort of the end of the fun water is the turnpike, I-90, 80. That's what that bridge is right there. After that, it's new water for all 4 of us. We'd never paddled that stretch, mostly because it's very flat and boring. But this was an opportunity for Amanda and I to see it in case we wanted to offer public paddles. So actually both of us at this point were on the clock again. So that's us going under the Turnpike Bridge. No, that's us going under the 75 bridge. So once you cross under the 75 bridge, you've reached the Port of Toledo. Wherever you can get out, you can be done with the Fort to Port. The nearest landing is Middle Grounds Metro Park. So it's just downstream of all the grain silos. By the way, if you go back, this is where the mural is. So we have pre-mural footage. Port of Toledo is one of the most developed, busiest ports on the Great Lakes. It has the least amount of private ownership of the riverbank of most of the Great Lakes. The Port of Toledo ships more dollars worth of economic goods than just about any other port on the Great Lakes. So it really is important. And that railroad track right there goes somewhere into downtown, but this is Miami Street over here. That is one of the top 10 busiest railroad tracks in the country. It is actually monitored by the Department of Homeland Security. Don't ever try to walk out there. You will be in trouble. So we did land at Middle Grounds, used the nice restrooms there, said hi to some of Amanda's coworkers, and then we got back on the boat. This is the high level, or the Anthony Wayne Bridge, however you want to call it. It was at this point that you wanted to get done, you're also tired and cold, and at this point, like, I just wanted to race to the end. Everyone else sort of kept the same tempo, so I would paddle, 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 and then I'd just drift. I've paddled this stretch before working for Metro Parks, so none of it was really new. Up ahead, though, there's downtown. Up ahead, when we got to the Colonel M. Schoonmaker, the old Willis B. Boyer. There it is. Up ahead here, before the new 280 bridge, Paul saw something in the water swimming. And he's like, is that a muskrat? Is that a beaver? And I'm like, no, it's a log. I didn't see it swimming. It just looked like a dark shape on the water. And he paddles closer, and I paddle behind him. He's like, it's a mink! And the mink from Van Wert. One of the things that was mentioned in Steve Pollock's articles were how many mink they saw on their trip. And we had yet to see a single one. The first one we saw was in downtown Toledo, which amazed me.
I pulled a dead mink out right along that area this past summer.
Okay, yep.
And I think Amanda was with she was.
There's a nice forested area over here that like Buckeye Pipeline or the city of Toledo owns behind the fire station. And you see some massive deer in there too. And underneath this bridge, there's access for maintenance and it's all forested. It's actually a really nice natural area and corridor right there.
Is this the Martin Luther King?
Nope, this is the Veterans Memorial Skyway,
Oh, big one.
the big one. Yep, there it is. So this must be the Craig Bridge, the old 280.
So where's the natural area?
It would be over here.
Right side?
Yep, East Toledo side. If you're turned around because we're staring upwards right now. No. I don't think there's any public access to the area. There are little 2 tracks where people must ride dirt bikes, but I don't know how they get in. And I don't know that I would get in and away from public site with it being in East Toledo. Yeah, so this was a bit of a slog, this part. If you're interested in shipping and industry, there's big boats. That boat no longer exists. They got sent to scrap. I forget what the name of it was. And I don't think it was a 1,000-footer, but it was over 700 feet long. I did one sort of port paddle for Toledo Metro Parks when I worked there where we were talking about how much was shipped and, you know, how big the port was and what it did. And I've since lost most of that knowledge because that's all in Lucas County and now I work in Wood County. But
Quick addition on the wildlife on the river. We live just south of Grand Rapids a little ways, and we were out west for 3 weeks. Came home and had a otter in the pond,
nice.
wreaking havoc.
Yes. That's funny. We had an otter that was found 2 winters ago that had been hit by a car literally on the driveway at Otsego Park.
Yeah.
And before that, we'd heard about otters in the lake across the road, that big subdivision. But the funny thing was, 10 years ago when I was with Metro Parks, we went out to an in-service at McGee Marsh, and the biologist out there, oh crap, I can't remember his name. He was the wetlands biologist for Division of Wildlife. Shieldcastle, Mark Shieldcastle. He told us, and this was granted 10 years ago, that river otter are poised to be one of the next nuisance wildlife. And they had already gotten calls from Northeast Ohio of landowners that woke up one morning and they just see big old bass heads on the banks of their ponds. Because for an otter, fishing in a little landowner's pond is like shooting fish in a barrel. It's so easy for them. They'll eat every big fish out of there and move on their way. Because most places are not far from a ditch or a creek that an otter will traverse. So, yeah, otters poised to be a nuisance. Since then, beavers.
We've got beavers too.
And if you haven't heard, wild turkeys are poised to be a nuisance. Don't feed wild turkeys. Because they will get so habituated to it that when you don't feed them, they will charge you and they'll peck you. And 18-pound gobbler is a scary thing when it's angry. So don't feed them. They are so pretty, and they were gone for so long. Yes, tasty too. Yeah, you want to scoot it to the end? There's a bar at the bottom.
That's an ugly part of the river to traverse, isn't it?
It's very industrial. Yeah, it's not. It wasn't anything awesome.
It's cool at night. It's lit up. And they've got a new thing over there. Yeah, the port, whatever, and it's pretty
Oh.
cool. Go back.
Paul saved it. I'll skip to the next one. I thought this was in the end of that video, but I was wrong. The bad thing about the Port of Toledo, we didn't have to deal with it, is power boaters and them not being safe and not knowing the rules of the road. The funny thing is, this entire trip, we only saw one other boat on the water, and it was a guy with a rowing scull, and he launched from Farnsworth the morning that we left. That was the only other boat on the water that we saw the entire trip. So this is the Maumee River. This is Grassy Island. This is a man-made island. This is the point coming off of Cullen Park. This is East Toledo / Oregon right here. Somewhere in here is the line. You hit the bay somewhere in here. I think officially the charts say right here. We basically hit the end of the island, and then we went right back to Cullen, where my family was waiting for me. Paul and I had considered, clicky, Craig? There's Grassy Island. Paul and I had considered flipping out of our kayaks in celebration at the end. It was too cold. And we were too tired, and we weren't going to do it, which was fine.
So the whole trip from Fort Wayne, you only saw one boat?
One boat. Yeah. It was the second week of May, so not a lot. So the water temperature, like I said, was sub 60, so that keeps a lot of the recreation boaters off of there. We saw white bass fishermen at Side Cut and near Pearsburg and Maumee, but we didn't see any of them with a boat. They're all shore fishing. No power boaters down here at all. Paul,
It was a man-made island?
yeah, that's, Grassy Island is man-made. It was basically river dredgings piled up over time.
So did you walk to Grass Island?
So we ran into it. That was our whole point. We knew that we were in Maumee Bay when we hit that island. So Paul made us all wait, line up, and we all paddled slowly, and we all touched at the same time, and it was fine. It was fine. Paul knows how to set a scene, so I trust him. We hung out there for a few minutes. Paul talked to his GoPro for his show. We got a group picture together. Woohoo! I was already looking back towards Cullen Park. I'm like, can I see my wife's car there yet? I want to go home. There's the shot.
Nice shot.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
So these are all the people that helped in one way or another. Wood County Parks gave me the opportunity to do this trip. I got paid for 2 of the 4 days. I didn't realize it at the time. Metro Parks paid Amanda for all 4 of the days. I know. I know. I took 2 vacation days. So, but Aptitude Outdoors, that's Paul's channel on YouTube, and he actually has a couple now. They focus on different things. Beacon, he's no longer with them. Village of Antwerp, like I said, without them, we would not have had an easy place to camp. Saying that, the bathroom made it a little more difficult. I got a great story out of it, indeed. Yes. Michael's Gourmet Catering, that's my Uncle Mike Armstrong. So we had really good food on the drive to Fort Wayne. He brought a goodie box, and then he had left his truck and my trailer at Cullen Park full of goodies. So we got to eat more on the way back to my house, and then we ordered pizza, and somehow my wife put up with us for about 45 minutes, even though none of us had showered in 4 days. And I know I didn't smell good. I didn't get close to the other 3. I don't know if I could have smelled them over myself.
Smell better or worse than the manure?
Different kind of funk. The manure was still worse. At least what I had was my own generation. You know, I could only blame myself. The Maumee River from the Ohio line to the Maumee River, or to Maumee Bay, is a state designated water trail. There are maps for it. They're supposed to be put-ins and pullouts every 10 miles. What is not there yet is the overnight infrastructure. So if this is a trip that you're looking to do, you do have to look out on your own for that, or have someone pick you up for the night and take you somewhere. Again, even from Oregon, Ohio to Fort Wayne, it's 108 miles. So it is something that you could potentially paddle for 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day, go home if you got picked up, and then get brought back the next morning. You don't have to rough it or be self-supported if you don't want to, because there's a lot of beauty to see out there. It is really enjoyable. So definitely run over time. I don't know if the YouTube cut off already. Oh, good, it's still going.
Did you get any type of certificate or anything?
You don't, but as far as I know, we were the first 4 people to do the fort to port after the water trail designation. There was an article in the Blade, you can go look it up. Paul did a lot of the answering, and that was, their new writer, he's not new anymore. What's his name? Matt Markey. Matt Markey did the article. So it was a whole back side of, I think, one of the Sunday editions with a picture that I took.
So no one really does anything to promote the fort to port? As a recreational opportunity in Northwest Ohio?
Not actively, and the biggest issue with it is it crosses 2 states. And trying to get state governments to cooperate is a challenge. I don't know if Indiana was even approached about the water trail. That's way above my pay grade. But there's not a designated water trail from Fort Wayne to the Ohio border as of right now. But like I said, it's 27 miles or so. Might be 30 from Fort Wayne to the state line. So you can do that in one day and be back in Ohio. Especially if you launch way before 10 a.m. like we did. We would have been done way sooner on day 1.
Are there rapids on that 27 miles?
If you were there in lower water than we were, probably. We floated over a whole bunch of bottom topography that we had no idea what it looked like. We could just see the little upwellings from the water bouncing off the bottom, but nothing that was a rapid in those first 2 days at all. Yeah.
On overnight accommodations that you're talking about, I mentioned we lived in Grand Rapids, and when you come up along the river towards Perrysburg, they've got the place on Granger Island, and
Toledo Metro Parks.
And I saw another one come up, or that's across Montego. Is that part of?
There's that Seagull Cabins, and then there's camping at Farnsworth.
That's right.
Yeah.
So Metro Parks,
The tree houses are,
But
they're platforms, not the tree
and we
houses.
went,
So-
there's a boat ramp right there.
so Metro Parks has Granger Island overnight camping, Farnsworth has overnight camping,
Yeah.
and then the newest one that you were thinking about is the Otsego Road Camp platforms.
Okay.
And that's right on the water trail, and it's right next to Benview Metro Park.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's tough because you land on Otsego Road.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, when they think Otsego Park, which is in Wood County. They're not that close together. About 8 miles apart on the river.
But that's a reservable.
I assume so. It wasn't in existence when we were paddling, and Farnsworth worked out really well, and it's actually the best developed.
It was the first summer last year, and their platform's $32 or $35 a night, and they book up really quick on the weekends. We went there
Yeah.
last year. They're awesome.
Nice. Other questions?
Would you do it again?
I was waiting for it. Someone was always going to ask. So when I did this talk the first time, it was like a year after, and I said no. I wouldn't do it again. Looking back, yes, I would do it again, with the caveat that I'd probably take 5 days to do it, and I would also, if at all possible, try to do it in the warmer months so there's less gear involved and it's just more pleasant. But again, it boils down to water flow. So I could schedule my vacation, July 4th weekend, either to end on the 4th or start on the 4th. And if conditions are good, great, I go. If conditions are bad, I just do a vacation somewhere else. Yeah, plan B.
Camp or would you stay?
I would primitive camp, especially if it's warmer out. And then there's also the opportunity, if you're more self-supported and you're in warmer weather, of contacting landowners along the way and asking if you just camp out at the edge of their farm field. I mean, if you bring enough water for 2 days, you only have to resupply water every 2 days.
There's camping at Mary Jane's.
There is, yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's the stretch from basically Fort Wayne to about 20 miles upstream of Defiance that there's no infrastructure to camp.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
all farm country.
It's all farm country, and half of it smells like manure in May. So, other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for attending and listening and having great questions. Shake hands.
Steal that. Well, thanks everybody for coming. Again, this isn't the first Basecamp Stories talk, but it's not the last one either. So coming up, we've got on January 19th, we have a professional climbing guide and instructor, Ben Wagner, of Adventus Climbing Gym, which should be opening in Toledo this upcoming late summer. That's what he tells me anyway, pencil it in. But he'll be talking about how to survive an ice storm while climbing halfway up the Grand Teton. Sounds exciting. Then after that, we have Jody Harrington. She's going to be talking about her trip across the country on the American Discovery Trail from the East Coast to the West Coast, hiking the whole thing. So that's an amazing experience too. And then last, but certainly not least, February 23rd is Eric Slough. He's going to be talking about Pictured Rocks, that trip, and the surrounding area, kayaking, again, kayaking. So that seems to be a pretty good one for this crowd, I imagine. So write that one down, February 23rd. So again, thanks so much for coming to this talk, and we'll see you at the next one, hopefully. Drive safe.